Millions of people around the world communicate using the English language, and it is now one of the widest spoken languages on earth.
But what most people don't know is where the language comes from, its complex grammar structure, and how much it has evolved over the centuries. These are just some of the things that school didn't teach you about the English language.
We'll begin with where the English language came from. As a West Germanic language, English was brought to Britain by Germanic invaders during the expansion into Western Europe. While Latin would have been the most prevalent language in Britain before the Angles and Saxons arrived in the 6th century, it did not survive as a native language of what would later become England.
Latin mainly influenced place names that already existed, such as London and Britain, but as soon as the Anglo-Saxon order existed, many different German dialects became the language of England, known as Old English.
The earliest example of Old English that can be found is the epic poem Beowulf, written sometime around the 8th century.
It is through this and other examples that we know that Old English was influenced heavily by Old Norse. In fact, approximately 2,000 of our words come from Old Norse, including anger, bag, law, sky, and leg.
After the Norman invasion in 1066, Middle English was born. This saw Latin and French heavily influencing the English language, creating thousands more words that we use today.
Since Old English was still spoken by and large by commoners, only the more intellectual and abstract words became part of the dictionary.
This is evidenced by the fact that more French-derived words have formal connotations today.
For example, while the French derivative cordial reception and the Germanic hearty welcome have the same meaning in their respective languages, in English, the cordial reception would be considered more formal. Another example is the rare construction of the words for animals being separate from the words for their meat, such as beef and pork, which are from the French bœuf and pork. The animal names cow and pig come from the German Kuh and Schwein.
Modern English is dated from around the 15th century, with the spread of the standardised London-based dialect in government and through the effect of printing. In 1604, the first English dictionary was published, which standardised the English that we use today. One part of the language which has dramatically changed over the years is our use of grammar.
School taught us where to put apostrophes and the difference between there, and there. But what it perhaps didn't teach us was how and why we use the word whom, and why some plurals differ from others.
The question words, such as why, when, and who, all stem from German. In Germany, pupils learn the difference between the nominative, accusative, and dative cases, whereas English schools don't.
The word whom relates to the accusative and dative cases, which describe what is suffering from the action of a verb.
For example, in the sentence, I rode a bike, the bike is accusative because the bike is suffering the act of being ridden.
If we say, I rode a bike to the hospital is the dative, because it is indirectly suffering the action. So how does this relate to the word whom?
Simply put, whom is used whenever it is either in the dative or accusative cases.
An easy way to remember would be to replace the word who with he, which becomes him when in the accusative or dative.
For example, the sentence, the dog ate him, would not sound right if you said, the dog ate he.
He is the accusative because he's been eaten, so we change it to him.
Similarly, if we turn this into a question, we'd say, the dog ate whom, or whom did the dog eat?
It works in exactly the same way with the dative. In the sentence, my cat threw a treadmill at him, the treadmill is the accusative because it is being thrown. Him is the dative because he is indirectly affected by this treadmill being thrown. So let's change this into a question. Whom did my cat throw a treadmill at? Once you get your head around that, you're set.
Plurals have always been a bit odd in the English language. Most languages have it set in stone what needs to be stuck on the end of the word to suggest there's more than one of something. But in English, the plural of woman isn't womans, it's women.
The en suffix comes from German, whereas the use of s comes from French. For example, the plural for beer is biers. In German, it's Biere or Bieren, and in French, it's Bière.
Easy, right? There are other types of plurals in the English language, but this covers the most common two.
Unfortunately, as with much of English grammar, there is no set way of telling whether a word needs an s on the end or not.
Speaking of which, forget the rule that I before e except after c, because that's also completely random. One of the most important things to know about the English language is that it's forever evolving. The Queen's English is already referred to as posh and upper class, and lol has officially entered the dictionary.
Grammar could become less important before too long, and apostrophe seemed to be a dying race.
But nonetheless, English is one of the most important and complex languages on earth.
It contains over 170,000 words and has influences from over a dozen different languages throughout history.
If you are looking for an easy language, then perhaps Esperanto is the one for you.
It's a language that was invented to be the language of the future, with only 200 words and no complex grammar rules.
So is that our future, or will English keep growing? It's up to you.